Hello and welcome to another 3D rigging systems update, and today I'm going to be covering the character. It is pretty much finished and there's a lot to talk about. So to begin with, I thought I would just start off with the skeleton to show what's changed. So last time I showed the rig off, all I had done was the legs, and that was fairly straightforward, and again it was just merely adding in the leg joint, adding in the IKs, and going from there, and making sure all the foot joints worked accordingly. Next it was a matter of basically just building everything else. So the next step was building in the arm, which essentially is the same as the leg. If you think about the way the leg bends, you want the same effect on the arm. And so from here it was adding in the arm, again orientating the joints down the bone, making sure everything's consistent. So for the arms I made sure X was crossways and Z was up and down, and Y followed down the bone, sort of keeping in line with what the legs had in mind. And from there I could build a hand, which again has all its bones set up here down the chain, and so forth. And then after that, the arm here was mirrored to this side, and it was just a matter of fixing all the fixing the IK in the arm bend, and doing the set-driven keys on the hand, which I'll show later. It's a bit similar to the set-driven keys on the feet, where we've got a few controls that you can use, and I'll go over all the rig in its in everything. Go over the entire rig of what you can do with it. Next was implementing the spine, which uses a slightly different IK, and this IK allows I don't think I can move it. I can't move it at the moment, but instead of doing a RP solver between two joints, the spline IK essentially allows you to deform a chain of IKs, and it produces a NURBS curve, which essentially controls the chain of bones, and for that you get a nice spine effect essentially, and that's what it's used for, and it's very helpful in order to get that sort of effect where it can bend in different ways, and it's very flexible in that sense. Flexible, very bad joke. Yeah, so that was all brought together, and there's a sort of a middle bone here to bring the arms in, and then that's connected to the spine. And then carrying up the spine chain, we then brought to the sort of neck area here, and then this is spreads out into some separate bones, so it's difficult to make out, but it'll become all clear once I put the mesh layer on. We've got two eye joints here that control the eye look. These two bones here are the eyebrows. You are able to manipulate the eyebrows, and here is the jaw bone that manipulates the bottom of the jaw, allowing for some very basic character mouth movement. And this bone at the top here allows you to tilt the head. So bringing in the controllers, I'll do it bit by bit. So last time I showed this, I just had this foot controller, allowed you to move the foot, you could rotate the foot, and so forth. One fix I did make was I realized the pivot of the groups in the IKs was slightly off. So one thing I did do was move it over. So now in the attributes over here, when you do things like the roll, it rolls in the middle of the foot rather than from the middle here, where it was causing some strange sort of movement, and that was the issue behind that. So that's fixed, and that's good. Also some other updates to the leg. I've now got a pole vector here that allows you to essentially position the knee and the direction of the knee, and that's very useful once you get into animating. And yeah, so after I had all the bones, I sort of did it in stages, so I was always constantly going back and forth between the mesh and the bones to making sure they lined up and worked correctly. So as I went along, I added in the controllers. So we had the feet controller uh, down here. We've also got a master controller that basically brings everything along with it. So the best analogy that I was told to this, what it does is to think of a toy soldier, where this is the base, and as you know, where you place it is where your character stands. And here we've got the arm controller. This uses inverse kinematics, so instead of animating from the arm and rotating down, we're able to put the hand where we want, and the subsequent bones follow it. Basically exactly the same as the foot does. Yeah, so that was fairly straightforward. And then on this controller, which I've named the grip controller, in the attributes over here, we do have some controls that allow us to manipulate the hand. So one control, we've got a hand grip, and since this is a game model, we don't really need the fidelity of each finger, so that you can have sort of various levels of grip. And so if the character's holding an object or something, you're able to, the animator's able to manipulate that. And we also got a bit of finger spread, and these were all done through set-driven keys. So when this value is changed, that adjusts the keys on the set-driven keys on there. So that was quite easy to achieve, and that's the same on the other side as well. So with the spine, one thing we had to do was implement clusters, which essentially act the same as grouping bones, as they allow us to add in a new pivot point for the chain of the bones. So this cluster allows us to control the CVs in the spline IK quite easily. So I can't select it. It's annoying to select because this curve is behind this bone, but basically in the curve CV, when you select the CVs, you're able to, under deformers, create a cluster. And like I said earlier, they're exactly the same as groups. So from there, I'm able to parent the cluster to this controller and essentially move the entire hip section. And as you can see, as I move the controller, the spine deforms, and the chain of bones all deform, because of that. Okay, that's very handy indeed. And we've also got another cluster at the top here to control sort of the top of the spine, and that allows us for a bit more flexibility in controlling it, and again, just very useful. And then coming up to the top of the head here, we've got a controller to tilt the entire head. We then got a controller for sort of the top of the neck, and here we have just a small controller to control the jaw, which isn't that obvious. It will be more obvious when I put the mesh layer on. And again, we've got some pole vectors at the back of the arm to control the elbow position as well. So now I'm going to turn on the character mesh, and I'll turn off the joints as IK, since that's pretty much been explained. And we'll come over to this GUI that I've set up. Now this GUI was fairly easy to make. It's just a combination of NURBS and a bit of text, which you can get under the create text in Maya here. And for an animator, all this is a easy way to control certain things. I could have taken it further and had, a GUI for the feet, and so instead of them having to click on the controller and then manipulate these attributes on the right here, could be more accessible for them. But again, it depends on the animator and really how far and easy you want to make it for them. For me, for this rig, I decided just to do it on the face. So I'll show some of the things that this GUI allows us to manipulate. So over here, the other thing I need to talk about. Yeah, so this GUI manipulates most of the facial features. So we got things like a smile slider, a frown slider, a blink slider, and if I just show what that does, so that allows us to control the smile, just some basic emotions, or we've got a frown, and we've got a blink. And to achieve that, those three things there, to achieve that, those were done through what's known as blend shapes. So what blend shapes allow us to do is blend basically build a mesh that's deformed slightly, and Maya will interpret this deformation and apply it to our standard mesh here. So for this one, I moved the verts manually up to sort of create a smile, and for this one I brought them down a bit, and for this one I moved the eyelid loops down as well as all the eyelashes to sort of create as if she's blinking. And then when we apply those blend shapes, which are found under the channel box, we can see all these different blends, and I've renamed them. And in order to control those blend shapes, by default you can move the slider here, but in order to say have it applied to a GUI, I had to bring up the connection editor, and basically what this allows us to do is essentially just apply one attribute to another. So I went and created 3 new attributes in the channel box here, and applied the blend shape value to these new attributes. Essentially it's the same thing, but because in the set driven key or in the expression editor these blend shape values aren't by default accessible. So in order to apply an expression to an attribute, I had to just quickly reconnect them to the meshes attributes, and with that I created an expression for each of these sliders. So let's just go into the animation editor and expression editor, and through a very simple expression by applying the translate of the slider, I was able to change the value of the blend. So if I just hide those blend shapes, and so if we look at, sorry, not the slider, it's not the slider but it's the mesh. So we look at the meshes attributes, we've got the smile, frown and blink. So if we open up the, say, the smile, we've got the smile value is equal to the smile slider, which is this nub circle over here, is equal to that its translate. Now this number here is a strange value indeed, but what it is if I don't have this value here, what happens is it applies this translate 1 to 1, and so by default this only goes up to 8.8 on the Y, and it tries to apply that to the smile. So what happens is the blend goes a bit crazy, and to get it so 12 is equal from 0 to 1, all I did was divide 1 by 8.8, and essentially that's the equivalent value. There's probably a better way to do that, but as a quick fix, that works just as fine. And again, you could most possibly do it through set driven keys, but an expression is far more flexible and quicker to iterate if you need to make changes. So that was applied to all of the blend shape controllers. So when the frown slider moves up, it blends to the frown, and when the blink sliders move up, it blends, or it changes the value on the attributes here to go to the blink blend shape. And in order to ensure that when you move a bone and you want the blend shape to be applied, there's a little thing you have to do on the inputs. It's the value of the inputs. I found apparently you need to have the skinning come before the blend shape, otherwise it will try to do the blend shapes after the skinning, and that causes problems. So that's one little thing you have to make sure that you do correct. And also the other thing is when you find when you have the blend shape editor up, you want all the blend shapes to be in one group and not separate groups, otherwise they don't blend together. And that's another conflict that can occur, because before that was the issue. I was trying to say have her blink and smile at the same time, but the way I had it set up wasn't working. So that's another thing to consider, to make sure all the blend shapes blend between one another. So the last thing on the GUI, we have the eyebrow slider, and all that does is, if I bring up the IKs again, I earlier said that we had some eyebrow joints, and all this does is rise on the set driven key, raise the bones up and down, just to create a bit more motion in the character, so we can have a bit of animation. And the last controller, which could have been simply achieved by having this pole or this null locator movable, by hand, I decided to add it on a GUI. So if you move this around, it tracks the eyes. It's a bit hard to notice, but if I zoom in here, when I move this around, the eyes follow that. It looks a little bit odd, but yeah, that works quite well. And I kind of left some of the weight painting around the eyelid a bit, just to add sort of that natural muscle movement. Looks a bit more natural, and I think that works quite well. So that's about it for the rig. Oh no, actually tell a lie, not quite. So in order to get the joints and joints in the mesh to work together, a lot of work on the skinning had to be done. I should have brought this up earlier, but I'll go over it now. So once we combine the two together, I think I went over this briefly, but by default, when you apply a smooth skin, by default Maya doesn't quite assign the right values to the vertices along along the bone. So in order to correct that, you have to spend a lot of time skinning, which is essentially applying the correct amount of weight to each bone. So in the case of the root bone, this is the hips is my root bone. This is sort of the area that it's affecting. I just bring up the weight paint options here. We can get a better idea of what I had to do. So in order to get a nice what's the word, collapse in between the leg here, I had to spend a lot of time painting a nice blend between the upper and lower leg. And by default, there's almost like it tries to smooth it too much, and the volume of the knee essentially gets smaller. So in order to get that natural crease, you have to spend a lot of time trying to blend the values between the two bones correctly in order to maintain that volume. And so I spent a lot of time trying to correct that, and it is just a matter of trial and error. Another problem I noticed is it depends on the mesh, but ideally this isn't the best amount of loops around the leg, and that's why it's caused a lot of hassle to get the right amount of weight in there. Essentially you want maybe one or two more loops in there to get a proper collapse on the leg, but just due to the sheer, there's just not enough geometry for it to crease properly, and I've managed to work around that, but that's definitely one thing to consider, is having the right amount of geometry to get that nice pinching effect, especially in the arms. Again, to get that took a lot of trial and error in the weight paint. But before, I'm sort of working backwards here, but before I started weight painting, I used a little tool in Maya called um, interactive skin bind, and what that allowed me to do is essentially start off with a fairly good base weight paint, and I don't think I can show you now, but oh no, there we go. But basically, it gives you this the cage that shows you sort of the area that this bone's affecting. Now, off the bat, Maya tends to do things like that, where you get in this case, the right leg being affected by the left leg's bone, and by having control over sort of off the bat what this bone's affecting, it gives you a lot nicer base to work from. So you're not spending time trying to paint out, areas that shouldn't be affected, rather than just trying to have spending more time trying to make the weight paint more smooth instead. That's at least what I found. And for me, that was a nice little tool to use, definitely for the skidding. And generally the skidding is just a lot of trial and error, just tweaking things bit by bit, and having everything try and talk to one another. So that's about it for the rig. It's taken a lot of patience and trial and error to get it all to work, but in the end I'm really happy with how it's come out, and I've learnt a lot, definitely, with a character. I've never taken a character's rigging this far, especially with the GUI. That's something I've never done, as well as all the controllers. Before, I used to directly just control the joints themselves, and I can see why you use controllers now. They make a lot of sense. For this last bit, I thought I'll just pose our character here and show some of the functions of the rig, so we can get a rough idea. So I'm just going to add a bit of toe roll there. I've add a bit of toe roll on this foot. So on the feet controllers, we have some attributes that you can modify, such as the ball roll and ball lift. So maybe we'll add a bit of ball lift there, and shift the weight of the character, and we'll bring her arm down, and let's add a bit of fist clench. And a bit of body twist from the spine icon. Other hand, but maybe not as tense on that hand. She's leaning over a bit, so I'll just pull it back a bit. And she's seen something, so we'll give her a bit of awe. She's not too happy about what she's seen. She's kind of close her eyes a bit. Turn her head around. Maybe she's looking up at something. So we'll move her eye focus over here, and let's just bring her arms in with these pole vectors. And just bring her legs up. And that wrist's a bit twisted. Let's have a look at that. And there we go. So, as you can see, controllers give us a lot of flexibility and accessibility to pose the character, and animation wise that would be more than helpful for animators and make the character a lot easy to animate, And all we need to do is zero out these controllers to bring it back to a fresh state, and there you have it. So that's my character rig. my first character rig, and I'm to have to say this again. I'm really happy with how it's turned out. I've learnt a lot. Maya's rigging options are really good. I thoroughly enjoyed the tools it has, and it makes it a lot easier, very easy for artists or riggers to rig a character and do all the necessary steps that are required. So thank you for watching, and see you next time.